Our final storyteller for this evening is Jim Petersen. He reached out to me, and I'm so excited to have him up on stage. Not only was he inspiration for our first storyteller, but he himself has lived a full life on the road, and also off the road. So Jim was the sex and adventure editor. So just put those two words together, okay? So sex and adventure editor for Playboy magazine for 40 years. This guy, for 40 years, his life was sex and adventure. And I don't know about you, but that's how I've been living my 47 years on life. All right, he wrote about sex when sex was new, when it was something you did in person. And as the adventure editor, he rode and frequently crashed motorcycles around the world, from the Himalayas to the Highway of Death in Bolivia, from South Africa to the Alps. And he says this: "The thing I like most about motorcycles is there is nothing between you and the world. The thing I like least about motorcycles is there's nothing between you and the world." Please welcome to the stage, Jim Petersen. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
As she said, the thing I like most about motorcycles, there's nothing between you and the world. The thing I like least about motorcycles, there is nothing between you and the world. I am lying in a hospital bed in New Delhi, India. Breathing tubes are in my nose. There's a needle taped to my arm, intravenous flow of antibiotics, painkillers, glucose, and there's a tube running out of the side of my body, filling a plastic bag with blood. And I say, how did I get here? Facebook. I don't celebrate birthdays, but I forgot to tell Facebook that. And when I turned 70, I started getting all kinds of condolences and stuff from around the world. But my friend Rob in New Zealand wrote me and said, "Jim, I'm going on a trip to ride motorcycles in the Himalayas. Support staff, mechanics, medics, 12 expert riders. There's a place open. What could go wrong?" And like a fool, I said, yes. So I'm lying in the hospital in New India, and I said, I knew I had been warned about this. The first time I got on a motorcycle was in 1969. A classmate had a Honda 160, said, "Want to take it for a spin?" And I said, yes. And about 2 blocks away from school, I'm going down a main street, and a woman in a Buick approaches from a side street, stops at the stop sign, looks me right in the eye, and pulls in front of me. I go into her side. I go over the bike on the hood of her car. She hits the brakes. I roll off onto the pavement. She jumps out of the car, starts hitting me with her purse, saying, "Where did you come from?" And I'm thinking, this never happened to Steve McQueen. Fortunately, there was a policeman right behind me, and he disarmed the woman, wrote her a ticket, and sat down with me on the curb. And he said, "She didn't see you. You are invisible on a motorcycle." 2, the question isn't if you will have another accident, it is when. 3, every motorcyclist I have scraped off the pavement thought he was invincible, immortal, until the day he wasn't. And I said, yes. And a week later, I bought my first motorcycle, a Suzuki X6 Scrambler with a pipe. I graduated from college. I got a job writing for a magazine in California, and I bought a 1970 Norton 750 Commando. The world's first super bike. It taught me everything I needed to know about sex. You would have to reach down and tickle the valves. Never mind. And I came to Chicago. I knew someone who had gotten a job at Playboy, and I walked in, and they asked me, "Can you give sex advice?" I was 25, and I said, "Sure, yes." I figured if it didn't work out, I would at least have a great story to tell for the rest of my life. This is me, the youngest editor at Playboy, my Norton, and you could clearly see it had an effect on women. I was the youngest editor at Playboy, and I was the only one who rode a motorcycle. Prior to that, Playboy was everyone dressed like James Bond and drove sports cars with fancy gadgets. I rode a motorcycle, and they think about Playboy, it was a general interest magazine, and if you were passionate about something, you could get it into the magazine. So I said, "Can I write about motorcycles?" And they let me. And every year I would go out to the West Coast and round up 6 motorcycles and do a kind of wine tasting. And the motorcycle companies loved me. Playboy was being read by 25 million people a month. And they were really, really smart. They said, "You don't know enough to appreciate the potential of the bikes that we are making." So they gave me lessons. Track riding. A guy named Keith Code was a privateer, and he gave me a whole day of lessons at a track. He's now Keith Code Superbike Schools, California Superbike School. Take a course. They taught me dirt bike riding. I said, "This is useless. There's no dirt in Chicago. It's called real estate and private property." But this was learning about traction. And then they taught me adventure riding. And don't ever trust your GPS. These lessons saved my life. Literally. I woke up lying on the street, Addison. I didn't know where I was or how I got there, and someone was pulling my head off my shoulders. And I saw a silver globe float down to the ground. And I said, "Oh, that's a motorcycle helmet." But it was eggshells. It was crushed. And I said, "God, whoever wearing that could be brain damaged." And I'm surrounded by people speaking a language I can't even recognize. But I think, oh, I can understand myself. I can make that work. And I look on the back of the motorcycle helmet is a name, Simpson. And I wonder, is that my name? And then the first memory comes back. I had just gotten back from a press introduction of a BMW motorcycle in the Alps. And I had gone down to Kmart and bought a helmet. And one of the editors who was on this press trip said, $10 bucket for a $10 head. Go back to Chicago, and the first thing you should do is buy a Simpson motorcycle helmet, state of the art. It will cost you a week's salary, but it will save your life. And it had. And another memory came back. When editors from motorcycle magazines go on a trip, they sit around the campfire and tell horror stories. And an editor said, "You know what the main injury in a motorcycle collision is? Castration. The bike stops, the rider doesn't, and you slide forward across the gas cap and it removes your genitals." I immediately grasped my gun. "Oh, I'm okay, thank God." And the policeman who had removed my helmet said, "Are you okay?" "Yes." "You speak English?" Yes, I'm wonderful." "What?" He said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, These people say you were going down the street at 90 miles an hour, weaving back and forth. And I said, and what did you say to them? Well, I asked him if he was going down the street at 90 miles an hour, weaving back and forth. Why the fuck did you pull in front of him? The car had done a U-turn right in front of me. I realized that, and evidently I had stood up, thank God. And I, to this day, cannot fill in what happened. My motorcycle was like 20 yards behind me. I was in the middle of the street. Evidently, I had stood up, and the injury to the bike was the rear fender of the bike, so I had almost gotten around.
Wow.
I went home and slowly started to recover. My neighbor, a wonderful lady, brought over food, pizza, salads, and I'm sitting at my dining room table, and she says to me, I have this overwhelming desire to have sex with you and to perform a specific act for which I am legendary. You don't even have to take off your clothes. And I said, you realize I have broken bones, a collarbone, ribs. If I move, I could like puncture a lung or sever an artery. I could die. And she said, that's part of the turn on.
Oh.
There are some things you should not say yes to. I subsequently buy every known form of protective gear, boots, helmets, I have a padded riding thing, military grade Cordura, padding here, and it is so stiff that at the end of the ride, I can stand it at the bar and buy it a drink. And then I start taking rides again. I'm allowed to write for everyone.
Wow.
And the secret to writing is to write about something you love. So half my job is writing about sex, and half my job is writing about motorcycle riding. And I do this for everybody. These are the golden years of my life. And then I meet the future mother of my children. I don't have a car. My license in Chicago for the first 10 years was only good for motorcycles. And we bought a house riding around on motorcycles. We bought a lawnmower. We bought a sewing machine. We did everything on motorcycles. And then she fell pregnant. And she insisted that I would not bring home my newborn child on the motorcycle. So we had bought an automobile, a Subaru. And I decided that I should not ride motorcycles for 7 years, that I needed to be there for my children. And so I would ride my bicycle to work from Evanston to Chicago. Like that was safe. 7 years came up and I said, I'm having a midlife crisis. And I could either have a mistress or a motorcycle. And I think the motorcycle would be cheaper. I was wrong. I bought a Norton and another Norton, and I explained to my wife that I wanted my children to learn profanity in the proper context, trying to start an English motorcycle. And this worked. They would come home from school, we kept a notebook. Butt face. Okay, let's go out to the garage and try it. Yeah, butt face works. And when they came of age, I put them in front of me on the bike and rode around the block. And my daughter said, go further, Dad. And my son said, go louder, Dad. And I realized my job as a dad was done. They had learned and appreciated my connection with the internal combustion engine. Farther, louder, it worked. Then my body betrayed me. My eyesight started to go south in a really strange way. I'd been nearsighted all my life, but now something was going on. And I said one night at dinner, I don't think I could pass the vision test for a driver's license. And my daughter said, "Oh, does that mean I get the Subaru?" And I said, "That's exactly the right opinion to have about this, reaction to have." So I went to a retinologist, an eye specialist, and I said, "Doc, I don't think I could pass the vision test for my driver's license." And he said, "This is Chicago. Everyone has an uncle in the DMV." And the notion that there are people with licenses who see as poorly as I did, well, he went to work on my eyes. Star Wars, he used a laser to cauterize blood vessels. He stuck needles in my eye, injecting steroids. The blood vessels at the back of my eye were doing to my retina what tree roots do to sidewalks. They crumpled and folded. There were blind spots. And I did what anyone would do with that kind of problem. I accepted an assignment to ride a motorcycle across from Brazil to Peru, 5 weeks, 8,000 miles.
Wow. Hell yeah.
I figured that the road ahead was shorter than the road behind, and I would make the most of what I had left. And on the third or fourth day, I saw what that meant. We passed the scene of an accident. A whole hillside was filled with people who were weeping. There were two bodies of what had been young men under a blue tarp. There was a Mercedes truck with 2 impact craters and a wadded piece of metal that had once been a motorcycle. And I rode past that and I started a mantra. Not me, not now, not yet. A few days later, that mantra really kicked in. We were in the hill country, and I came around a gravel road at the exact same moment a truck came from the other direction. If this was a graphic novel, I would draw you the driver's face, the sweat bursting off his face. And he hit the brakes, and I can still hear the sound of scrabbling tires on gravel. There was a tiny opening about a yard, and I twisted the throttle and said, "Not me, not now, not yet." And I made it through that opening. On my right was a cliff down into a raging river. I made it past.
Wow.
Here is why I ride. It takes me places where I see something beautiful and meaningful. This is in an alley in Cusco. A child was experiencing complete joy running down an alley with a kite. Speed sets something free, soaring. And I think that's what motorcycling does to me, for me. It takes you someplace. It's not always this exciting or elegant. This is halfway through the trip. This is one of my favorite photos of all time. You get exhausted. I'm sitting in Bogota, and I'm reading a newspaper, and it says, "A bus fell off the Andes, killing 17 people." And I think, what a weird phrase. A bus fell off the Andes? It happened on something called Camino del Norte, the highway of death. It's widely considered to be the most dangerous highway in the world. 300 people a year died on it. And my friend, now friend Rob, and I decided to ride the highway of death. I can't watch this. That's my helmet down there, the camera's on top. I watched this and I said, does this guy know the fuck what he's doing? On one side is mountain, on one side is not. There are maybe, it's 34 miles. Wow. And there are virtually, I think there are like 20 feet of guardrails in the whole 20 miles.
Wow.
If this gives you nightmares tonight, I apologize.
Do cars come the other way? Cars come the other way?
No, it used to be cars in both directions, and you could only pull off there. This is 1 car wide or less. They made it a one-way road.
It's only one way now?
It's one way, and it's now a T-shirt. You'll see ATVs go by, mountain bikes go by. It's a downhill rush. But it's one way unless you blow it. And I tried to that's my friend Rob in front. And here are what they use instead of guardrails. Every few miles you would encounter a shrine to someone who had gone off the highway. In that spot, there would be flowers, family photos. This is what they do instead of driver ed in South America. And I couldn't stop or look at these while I was on the highway at dusk because you go where you look. But I found these to photograph as we came out. And this was my motto. I taped a yellow thing on my windscreen. My motto became further mileage. And you would turn around a corner and see the strangest things. And this is somewhere in Peru. And just the vastness. Like, this was a day where we rode at 100 miles an hour all day and didn't see anything. Okay, so my friend Rob calls up and says, we're gonna ride motorcycles in the Himalayas. What could go wrong? Royal Enfields, I heard someone admit to owning one of those. I hate this fucking bike. But I said, okay, and went out. What could go wrong? Well, it was monsoon season. It's as though they turned a river on its side and it came down, and when it wasn't in a downpour, it was a fog. And this is a main road that we had to share with trucks and buses and reared animals. This is a yak. And you would come around a corner and it would be standing in the road looking at you, and it would say, I'm sacred. What's your excuse? And we pulled off somewhere, and my girlfriend said, what was the yak doing there? I said, we didn't interview it. We didn't talk to it. We just hoped it wouldn't notice us. This is where the accident occurred. This strip of thing, the front wheel of the motorcycle washed out. I still can't figure it out. There might have hit that rock and just nudged the wheel, and the bike went out from under me. And I got pitched down this embankment, rough street, and I'm plunging headfirst down this embankment, and all I can think of is the movie Romancing the Stone, where Michael Douglas slides out of it and ends up with Kathleen Turner's thighs around his face. And I'm thinking, that's not going to happen. And I grab a bush and pull myself to a stop. And I worked my way up, and I was banged up. The medic checked me, and there was no swelling. And I rode for 3 more days. And I saw things of great beauty. Right now we're at 17,000 feet.
Whoa.
And it's a place where people on the trek to Mount Everest stop. And the notion that laundry goes up and becomes prayer flags, I thought that was just the story of life. I rode for 3 more days, and on paved roads, it was exhilarating. I was flying. On roads where the mountain was trying to reclaim the road, not so good. That was pure agony. And it got, after 3 days, where I could not hold the bike up. I had to ask my friend Rob to hold it while I got on it. And we finally got to a town where there was a rumor of a hospital. And I checked in. I sat in the waiting room. And in the waiting room, there was some kind of epidemic going on. And so the waiting room was filled with children being brought by their parents. And there was a kid with a T-shirt that said, "Mistakes sometimes make the best stories." I wanted that T-shirt, and by the time I left India, it would have fit. They took me in for an X-ray. 5 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and a chest cavity full of blood. They checked me into the hospital. I'm really understated. I texted my family at home, slight mishap. And the guide for the tour said, "No, give me your daughter's phone call, your girlfriend's phone call. They have to work to get you out from the States." And so my daughter, who was nursing her brand new son, got on the phone and organized an emergency evacuation. And I'm in the hospital. The blood is draining out into that. And this device, the only therapy I have is to try to reinflate the lung. And this has 3 balls in it. And at first I could only get 1. And then 2. And Carl, the British Special Forces medic who had accompanied us on the trip, comes into the hospital room and says, "Petersen, any wimp can suck 2 balls. Make that blue ball dance." And when I was in the hospital, and I told my friend Rob, "If you come to the United States, I'll give you my motorcycle." COVID hit. I had to ship it to New Zealand. It took 1.5 years to make it out from Long Beach to New Zealand.
Wow.
And I think I had said I had it now with motorcycles. I can pretty much not see out of the side. This is my favorite cartoon of all time. Never known real happiness? What about time? We had a breakfast at a place in Wilmette called Fuel. We went there a couple weeks ago, and there was a perfect 1974 850 Commando, immaculate. And I waited until the guy came out just so I could hear him start it. And it made a sound like rolling thunder. And I asked him where he had gotten it, because no bike I had ever seen looked as good as this. "Oh, there's a place in Colorado, Norton Works. You can buy them for $45,000. And this was at the time the government was about to shut down, and I expected all the money in my IRA would disappear. So I thought, maybe I could take $45,000 out and buy a Norton and just look at it for the rest of it. Thank you.